Alright, let's have a discussion about science fiction. But before we dive into anything, let's just break down what it means. So it's not just lightsabers and aliens, it acts as a vessel for us to examine society and ask the question, what really happens if we keep going this way? Now, all good science fiction uses something called cinematography. And what that just means is, in other words, it's how a story is told visually. It's how a film can really be felt instead of just watched. I'm going to be talking about two films, Avatar and District 9. Both movies about aliens, but really, they're about us. I'm going to talk about how these films critique the good, bad, and the ugly about society through cinematic techniques, and how that combined with the thematic exploration of these films really amplify the storytelling of these movies and what they say about our society. So let's jump in. Before we really understand what this critique is and means, I think we need a little bit of history first. Sci-fi started with a spectacle. George Méliès's A Trip to the Moon, released in 1902, was the first film that really transversed audiences to imagine a world that's beyond Earth. But by the 1920s, Metropolis was already using cityscapes to critique class oppression. But for decades, science fiction mainly served two purposes: escapism, which is seen in the very popular Star Wars series, or reflecting simple Cold War and World War paranoia. Avatar didn't just showcase new technology. It used hyper-real computer-generated imagery and 3D technology to create a hyper-real, complex, and beautiful film that showcased the ills of our society and the ills of our history. This is containing colonialism, imperialism, environmental damage, and corporate greed. Simultaneously, District 9 fundamentally broke the mold by rejecting the Hollywood aesthetic and standard of what a sci-fi film should look like. By using a mockumentary style with handheld footage, unsaturated colors, and gritty realism, it dragged aliens into the painful and harsh reality of South Africa and its history of exclusion, such as apartheid and xenophobia. These two films proved that political film could still be box office gold, shifting the genre's focus from what if to why are we letting this happen to us now. Now James Cameron executes his critique of societal issues via visual polarity. Pandora is filmed with fluid, haptic camera movement, often circling to establish a sense of ecological wholeness. However, the RDA base, by contrast, is defined by static composition and hard metallic refractions. The difference in movement is the film's moral compass. This is framing as political alignment. The Na'vi are framed in wide shots that situate them within the environment. However, humans are trapped in confined close-ups, reflecting their ideological alienation. The color temperature, saturated blues and greens versus cold, cynical fluorescent, is a deliberate choice to code the colonizers and imperialists as sterile and destructive. The aerial gaze becomes the colonizer's perspective. During the attack, the cinematography shifts to visceral destruction. James Cameron uses the stereoscopic depth to make the violation of the ecosystem physically uncomfortable for the viewer. This once living world is framed like a corpse, a visual execution of the extractive narrative. The quest for unobtainium is a direct allegory for settler colonial extraction. The visual tension between industrial grayness and ecological color effects reflects global conflicts like the Amazon and South Africa's own history of mining, capitalism, and environmental degradation. Avatar demands empathy by making the land beautiful. The destruction is, therefore, a cinematic violation where we feel it firsthand. Now Neil Blomkamp creates an aesthetic distance but eventually destroys it. This makes District 9 gritty and realistic. The mockumentary style uses handheld jitter and high contrast desaturated footage to simulate real-time news coverage. The camera constantly zooms and pans, reflecting a journalistic gaze that is ironically already complicit in the systemic dehumanization. The spatial composition is a direct map of apartheid architecture. The camera descends from the stable symmetry of the polished city to the chaotic, trash-filled slum. The camera stability becomes a class marker. The alien camp is defined by fences and checkpoints, visualizing a system of controlled visibility, a direct analog to the historical District 6 removals. The aliens are the allegorical others, mirroring a plight of migrants and informal traders in contemporary Johannesburg. The cinematography uses low exposure and practical lighting to expose economic neglect. The visual grime is an aesthetic truth that grounds the fiction in the painful reality of xenophobia and state indifference. The film achieves its ethical core when the camera abandons its objective distance. When Vickers begins his metamorphosis, the cinematography switches from a documentary, observational mode to a subjective, panicked body horror. The extreme close-ups signal the loss of white privilege, forcing a viewer into haptic empathy, a feeling of shared bodily discomfort. To fuse these critiques, let's just turn to a real-world scenario that happened in South Africa. Project Coast, a covert apartheid-developed program that developed chemical and biological weapons for political ends, illustrating the state's ultimate willingness to weaponize even the bare environment against the oppressed. This context is elevated in both films. District 9's MNU lab scenes directly mirror Project Coast's sinister manipulation of biology and knowledge for political dominance. And while Avatar's critique centers on extractive capitalism, the RDA's goal is practically identical: total domination over the oppressed. Both narratives prove that when the state or the corporation views life, be it prawn biology or Pandora's ecosystem, as a mere resource of war and political leverage, the aesthetic choices reveal an ethical horror. This case study of Project Coast confirms the thematic exploration that humanity's lust for power overrides its morality every single time. The shared lesson is that the camera is an ideological instrument. Its angles, movement, and fidelity determine whose reality is validated and whose is not. Both films insisted that social critique is not just delivered via a script, it's encoded into the very structure of every element of a movie, from the image to the music. They prove that aesthetic choices are really moral and ethical choices. So the next time you go to watch a movie or you want to shoot your own footage, just look deeper. Think about how is the story really being told by the lens. Because everything is a choice and everything is a critique. That is the real lesson from Avatar and District 9. Thank you for